Today's video is hopefully going to be an easy tutorial for people who are making a character for Dungeons & Dragons 5e for the very first time. Because when you make your very first character by yourself, it can be very confusing and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Hopefully you have somebody who can help you, but if not, hopefully this video can help you. So, something that you'll need is access to the player's handbook. This gives you all the information about the different races and the different classes and stuff like that, and a bunch of other things that we're going to look at. You're also going to need a character sheet. The standard character sheet looks like this. However, there are a bunch of different variations and variants that people have made, but they all hold the same information. They just display them in a slightly different order. You'll need a pencil if you're working on a physical character sheet, although there are PDF form fillable versions available, so if you want to work digitally, you can do. And you may also need your set of dice, specifically your 6-sided dice, or your D6. Alright, so first part is the character sheet. It looks like this. This is the first page. However, if you have an actual printout, you'll also see the second page and also this third page. The first page is what we're going to focus on today, holding most of the information and numbers that needed to basically play the game. The second page is kind of your fluff and your rounded out character ideas, your backstories and stuff like that. So that can be filled in later. And the third page is if you choose a spell casting class. This is where you can write down the spells that you know. And again, we won't do that today. That can be a different video. So we're going to focus on this first page. All right. So, a bunch of confusing squares and things. First, we are going to look at the 6 abilities down the very left-hand side, because these are what basically make your character. You know, you decide using these 6 abilities what they're going to be good at and maybe not so good at. So the first one is strength. Now there's a funny way I've heard to describe all of these abilities. So obviously strength is how many tomatoes can your character carry. That is your strength. So if you want a strong character, you're going to focus on this ability. Next one is dexterity. This is how many tomatoes can your character dodge out of the way of if somebody was throwing them at your character. The next one is constitution, and this is how many rotten tomatoes could your character eat before getting sick. The fourth one is intelligence. Intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom, knowing that even though a tomato is a fruit, you should never put one in a fruit salad. And the last one is charisma, and that's being able to sell somebody a fruit salad made solely of tomatoes. So these are the 6 abilities, but what do we do with them? What do we need to do? What we need to do is we need to create ability scores. We need to put a number in each of these boxes, which will tell you what your character is good or bad at, and that's completely up to you. What you want if you want your character to be strong, or if you want your character to be charismatic. So there's a few different ways to do this. So we're going to look at 3 different ways to do this. One of them is called the standard set of scores, and you can find this in the player's handbook, and that's a score of 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. Obviously being that the higher the number, the better you are at this ability. So if you wanted a very strong character, you'd put your 15 in strength. If you wanted a very intelligent character, you'd put your 15 in intelligence, and so on, and you'd figure it out from there. The other way to do it is called the 27-point buy. Sounds a little confusing. On page 13 of the player's handbook, you will see a little table that looks like this. And this is basically saying that if you want to give your ability a score of 8, it won't cost any points. But if you want to give your ability a score of 15, it will cost 9 of your 27 points. So some examples it gives in the book are to go for 15, 15, 15, 8, 8, 8. So 3 very good stats and 3 very poor stats. Or there's a very, very average stat of 13, 13, 13, 12, 12, 12. But there are a bunch of other combinations. So if this is the way you wanted to do it, then this is how you do that. The third one is the 4d6 random score generator. Now, a d6 just means your 6-sided dice, your standard dice that you're used to seeing. And what you do is you roll 4 of them, like so. You ignore the lowest scoring dice, and you add together the remaining 3 dice. So you've got a score. So you would do this 6 more times, rolling 4 dice, ignoring the lowest scoring dice, and adding together the remaining 3 dice until you have a set of 6 scores. There's another variation where you actually do 7 scores and then you're allowed to drop the lowest and keep the remaining 6. There's a bunch of different variations. Your DM will tell you which one they want you to do with any of these. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to go with the standard set of scores. So what do we do with them? And what do they mean? So on page 12 of the Player's Handbook, you can see this. This just gives you a bit of a rundown of each ability score, for example, what they're good for. So strength measures natural athleticism, bodily power, and it also gives you some of the classes that it's important for. So strength is important if you want to be a barbarian or a fighter or a paladin. Okay, and you can also see in this box here a thing called racial increases. So if you choose, for example, to be a Dragonborn character, you can see that Dragonborn allows you to increase your strength score by 2 and also your charisma score by 1. So whatever number out of this standard set of scores you put in your strength, you would actually be able to increase that by 2. And whatever score you then put in your charisma, you would be able to increase by 1. Each of these is also available within the chapters dedicated to the classes and the races, but this is just an easy to see all the information at once. So I'm going to go with a wood elf druid for this character, just cause. So an elf gets a +2 dexterity increase, and a wood elf then gets also +1 in wisdom. Now I've decided I want to be a druid, so I look and see which score is important for druid, and it says that wisdom is important for druid. So I'm going to put my 15, my highest score, in wisdom, which will actually then be a 16 because being a wood elf allows me to increase that score by 1. I'm then going to put my 14 in dexterity, and again, being an elf allows me to increase that score by 2. So now I actually have 2 scores of 16, even though I only had a 15 and a 14 to start with. And then I'm going to fill in the rest of the numbers. So I'm going to put the 13 in Constitution, the 12 in Intelligence, the 10 in Strength, and my lowest score in Charisma. I'm not going to be a very charismatic character, but I'm going to be quite wise and quite dexterous. So what do these big numbers mean? How are they important to the game? So the next thing we need to look at is what's called the modifier. These big numbers create a smaller number, and the smaller number is called a modifier, and this is what's important to the game. So on this table on page 13 of the Player's Handbook, you can see that if you have a score of 1, your modifier would be -5. That's obviously very terrible. And so on. Most player scores usually range from 8 and cap out at 20. You can't usually go higher than 20 unless you have magic items, but we won't talk about that now. So a strength score of 10, you can see, gives me a modifier of 0. It doesn't modify the dice. But however, a score of 16 gives me a modifier of 3. So when I roll a 20-sided dice for things that require being dexterous, I get to add 3 to that score, to that dice roll. Constitution gives me a score of +1. Intelligence is also +1. Wisdom, again, is +3. And Charisma is -1. So the idea is that 0 just means you're average at this skill. So I'm not weak and I'm not strong. I'm just of average strength. and then so on. So if +1 means you're slightly above average, and a +3 means you're quite good at that thing. So now we've created these modifiers, but what do they actually do? So let's look here. We have this box here. We have a box called saving throws and a box called skills. In the game, when something tries to hurt your character or, affect your character, your DM might ask you to make a saving throw. So you'll roll the dice. You'll roll the 20-sided dice that looks like this, and whatever the score is will determine whether you feel the effects of this thing. So, example, if you set off a trap, your DM might say, make a saving throw for dexterity. So you would roll the dice and you would hope that the number would be high enough so that you could avoid the effects of that trap. So what we're going to do is, we're basically just going to put the modifiers next to these things, because at the moment, this is what they are. So if you were asked to make a dexterity saving throw, I would roll the 20-sided dice and I'd get to add 3 to the result of the dice. Okay? The skill checks are when you try to do something with an undetermined outcome. So for example, if I looked at acrobatics, that's a dexterity skill check. So let's say I want to climb a tree very quickly to escape a pack of wolves. My DM might ask me to make an acrobatics check to climb the tree. So I would roll the 20-sided dice that you can see, and then I would get to add my dexterity score on top of that roll. So I'm just going to fill these in. As you can see, animal handling, it says is wisdom, arcana is intelligence. So basically you look at whatever the ability score is, and then you put that number next to that skill. Okay. Now some other versions of the character sheets, they kind of group them a little better. So if you'll have a dexterity, and then it'll have all the skills that require dex next to that score. But this one, it's just doing it in alphabetical order from A to S. But you can see in the brackets next to it, that's the skill that you'll use for that thing. So now, whenever I'm asked to make a saving throw or a skill check, I roll that 20-sided dice and I add the number that I can see, depending on what the check is. And next to these skills, you can see a little circle. So we're going to talk about what they mean next. So, for each class, for example, I'm playing the Druid class. For each class, they have proficiencies. And what this means is what your character is basically more gifted at. Like, what are they about? What makes them them? So as a Druid, it says I get a proficiency in the intelligence and wisdom saving throws. So I'm just going to put a little black dot next to those to say that I am proficient in those. And then I get to choose 2 skills from Arcana, Animal Handling, Insight, Medicine, Nature, Perception, Religion, or Survival. So I'm going to make my Druid proficient with Nature and Medicine. Let's say that that's what this character has decided that's what they're about. They spent years in the woods creating salves and lotions to cure diseases. So I've put a little dot there. But what does being proficient mean? Why does it make it any different? So we've got to look up here. Proficiency bonus. If you're proficient in something, you get even more of a modifier to the dice roll. And it can be quite tough to remember if you don't mark it down on the sheet like this. So as you can see, at level 1, which is what we're going to create, my proficiency bonus gives me +2. And you can see that at level 5, it becomes +3, and at level 9, it becomes +4, and up to level 20. So now I can actually change the scores of the skills and saving throws that have little black dots next to them. So intelligence would actually now be a +3 modifier, because I have an intelligence score modifier of +1 and a proficiency bonus of 2. So that's 3. Wisdom would give me +5, which is awesome. And I get to change this on the skills as well. So medicine goes from +3 for being wisdom to being +5 for wisdom with my proficiency. And nature gives me a +3. So now these are what my character is proficient in. So, for example, if my adventuring party needs somebody to help them heal and I need to do a medicine check, they would ask me because I'm proficient and I get a +5 to the roll. And down here we have what's called a passive wisdom or passive perception. And this is basically how well your character can kind of figure things out around him while they're not actually concentrating on that thing. basically like, oh, if you were like in a tavern, how well would you notice the shady character in the corner if you're not really paying him any attention? Something along these lines. Or how well would you notice the person stalking you in the forest? So that's made up of a score of 10 plus whatever your perception score is. So perception is made up from wisdom. I get +3 in wisdom, so my passive wisdom is 13. Okay, so now we've figured out these numbers, the big numbers and the modifiers and what they do. So now let's look at equipment. So whatever class you choose, there'll be a paragraph in the chapter for that class that tells you what equipment you're proficient in and what equipment you also start with at the beginning of the game. So as a druid, I'm proficient with light armor, medium armor, shields made of wood instead of metal. That doesn't really matter. All shields have the same impact on the character. That's just a flavor thing. For weapons, I'm proficient with clubs, daggers, darts, javelins, maces, quarterstaffs, scimitars, sickles, slings, and spears. And for tools, I'm proficient with a herbalism kit. Okay, but let's look at what I actually get to start with. So you'll see a chapter like this. You start with the following equipment in addition to the equipment granted by your background. Now the background is something we'll look at shortly. So the first one, it says I can have a wooden shield or any simple weapon. The next line is a scimitar or any simple melee weapon. And the third one is leather armor, an explorer's pack, and a druidic focus. So first, let's try and figure out what my armor class is going to be. This is often referred to as AC, and it basically is a number that any enemies will have to roll higher than in order to hit you in a battle. So it's how much, armor you have. So for a druid, I have leather armor and I also have a shield. So if you look at this box on page 145 of the player's handbook, it's an armor table. So now I can see that leather armor gives me an AC of 11 plus whatever my dexterity modifier is, which is 3. So I have an AC of 14. I also have a shield. And you can see at the bottom of this table, a shield grants me +2. So I take my leather armor of 14, my shield of 2, and I get an AC score of 16, and that's pretty good. So now in battle, enemies will have to roll 16 or higher to hit me in battle. Okay, and I'm just going to jot down these other things. Leather armor, wooden shield, explorer's pack, druidic focus at the bottom of this sheet in a little equipment box. So the next thing we're going to look at is the weapons, and this can be found on page 149 of the player's handbook. You see, being a druid grants me starting equipment of a scimitar, so I'm going to use that. That's what I'm going to go with. I'm not going to choose any of the other simple weapons. I'm going to choose the scimitar. So here on the table, you can see that it tells me what the damage is. If I was to hit somebody in battle, what dice would I roll? You can see that some of them are 1d4, that's a 4-sided dice. Some of them are 1d6, 6-sided dice, 1d8, 8-sided dice. Some of them are 1d10 and even 1d12. A scimitar, you'll find, is 1d6 slashing damage. And it also has a couple of properties, but we won't focus on those right now. So in this box here, this is where we will jot down our weapons. So we'll write the name, scimitar. Well, you can name your weapon. You can call it Karen. I don't know. But the stats of your weapon are here, and I'm using the stats of a scimitar. So you can see the next box says attack bonus or ATK bonus. And what that is what you can add to an attack roll, which is like a skill roll. You use the 20-sided die, and you then get to add a bonus to that roll in order to hit things when you are fighting. So, a melee weapon, such as a scimitar, or all melee weapons, they usually use strength as the bonus. And if you're proficient, you get to add that too. So if it was a strength-based melee weapon, I would have obviously a score of 0 and then a proficiency bonus of 2. So my ATK bonus would just be +2. However, a scimitar has a property called finesse, And that allows the user to use their dexterity score instead of their strength score. So actually my ATK bonus or attack bonus is +5. I have a dexterity score of 3 and I'm proficient with a scimitar. So when I roll this dice to attack something, I get to add 5 to that roll. The next box is damage and type of damage. As you can see on the table, a scimitar is 1d6, which is your 6-sided die, like this. And when you use your weapon, again, usually using strength, in some cases dexterity, you get to add a bonus onto that damage. So I'm actually going to use dexterity because it's a finesse weapon. So my damage is this 6-sided dice plus 3. So I can get between 4 and 9 points of slashing damage if I attack something in a battle. Right, so now we figured this out. We figured what it's going to take in order to hit us in a battle and what we're going to do to hit things in a battle and what damage we can do. So the next thing we're going to look at is just some other stats just to fill out this middle column. If you look here, we can see we have a thing called initiative and speed. Initiative is basically a dexterity roll that you have at before a fight starts. So you're about to start fighting with a camp of orcs, and your DM says roll for initiative. So what you'll do is you'll roll that 20-sided dice and you'll add your dex score. So my dex score is 3, so I would roll a 20-sided dice and I would add 3. And what we do is then we go from highest to lowest, and that determines our order in the fight because it becomes turn-based at that point. So if you roll a 20 plus 3, you've got a good chance of going first. If you rolled a 1 for me plus 3, that's a score of 4, it's likely that I'm going to be going last in the round. But that's your initiative score. It's just a dexterity skill check. The next one is speed. And this is how much you can move in one round, which is considered 6 seconds, but it's basically how far you can move on the battle map. Most races are 30 feet. There's only a couple of the smaller races where you get 25 feet, and then there's a few classes that actually allow you to go faster than that. But most base speeds are 30 feet. And if you consider each square on a battle map is considered 5 feet, it tells you how far you can move on this battle map. So the next thing we're going to look at is this: hit points. Hit point maximum, current hit points, temporary hit points, etc., and hit dice. So your hit points, obviously your life. Each class in their chapter has a dice that is kind of linked to how much HP they can have. And it changes depending on the class. You'll see that at level 1, everybody gets to have their a certain score based off of the dice and your constitution score. So for a druid, they get to determine their hit points based on an 8-sided dice. So at level 1, I'm allowed to have 8 hit points plus whatever my constitution modifier is, which is 1. So I have a hit point maximum at a level 1 of 9, okay? Now, when something attacks me in battle and I drop away from 9, I will jot that down below that line in the current hit points thing. You can leave your hit point maximum at the number until it changes when you gain a level. That's not important. What's important is at level 1, in your chapter for your class, you will see a score. It will give you a score. And you basically take that score and you add your constitution modifier, and that's where you start with. You can see a box that says hit dice. So as I said, mine is an 8-sided dice, or a D8, and at level 1 I have 1 of these, and when I get to level 2 I will have 2 of these, and level 3 I will have 3 of these, etc., etc. And what this is when your character has a little break for an hour, maybe they stop traveling, maybe they just had a fight and they decide to sit down and have a picnic, you have the choice to regain some of your hit points if you've lost some of them. So, as I said, for a druid, I get to roll an 8-sided dice and I get to add my constitution, and if I've lost any hit points in a battle before I've sat down, I get to regain them. This is different from a long rest, which basically just puts you all back up to full health if you have like 8 hours of light activity. Right now, this isn't important, but it's something that is shown in the chapters for whichever class you choose, and you can just jot them down here. If you need any clarification, I'm sure your DM will help you there. But that's basically that for now. The next thing we're going to look at is background. So that fills in all of this stuff here, and it's basically what makes up your character. What are they like? How are you going to play them? Like, are they kind of a bit of a lone wolf? Are they super chatty? Are they kind of a bit of a hulking dumbass? Or are they quite intelligent? So from page 127 in the Player's Handbook, there is a list of different backgrounds, and they will help you fill in these boxes. And they'll also give you more equipment and skill proficiencies. So for my character, I'm choosing the Outlander background, and it gives you a little description of what that might mean. It tells me that as an Outlander, I gain proficiency in athletics and survival, so now I can add that to my skills with a little black dot next to them. So I'm going to add a black dot next to athletics and change that from 0 now to +2 because I'm considered proficient. My strength is 0, which is bad, but I'm proficient, so that gives me a +2 bonus. And survival now changes from +3 to +5 because it's a wisdom check with proficiency. Okay, it tells me that I'm also proficient with a type of musical instrument. I also get to choose another language, and I get some equipment such as a staff, a hunting trap, a trophy from an animal you've killed, which you can determine at that point, a set of traveler's clothes, and a belt pouch containing 10 gold pieces. So there's a little box in this bottom left-hand corner which I'd cut off previously because it wasn't too important, but it says other proficiencies and languages, and you can jot down all of this stuff in this box. Now I've just said that I know one language and a language granted by my race. Of course, these are all noted in the Player's Handbook, and you can choose whatever they are. So you have a language granted by your race, but then you can also, you'll know like common, for example, but then this allows me to choose one, and I could choose abyssal if I want to speak abyssal, or etc. I'm going to leave that just for now. It's not important. And there's also this box, the equipment box, and I can just jot everything down in here. And on the left-hand side, it allows me to jot down the money that I have. So the pouch containing 10 gold pieces, I can put GP 10. I have 10 gold pieces, and I've jotted all the other things there: a staff, a hunting trap, a trophy, all in this box here. So you can see here, for an Outlander, I get to choose an origin. It gives me the option to roll a d10 so that it's random, but I could also just choose it. For now, this isn't really important to me. Let's just say I'm a hunter-gatherer for the sake of this. I could jot that down somewhere, that I'm a hunter-gatherer, that's my thing. You can see this feature, Wanderer. Now this gives me something important to the game. This gives me something that I can do. So I have an excellent memory for maps and geography. I can recall the general layout of terrain. So this is important if I'm ever traveling. And this box on the left-hand side, the lower left-hand side, is where I can jot down this sort of stuff. So I'm just going to type Wanderer here. You could type the whole explanation here so that you've got it in front of you, basically meaning what you can do. I can find food and fresh water for myself and up to 5 other people and stuff like that. So I can write that there just to remind me that that's what I can do. It also gives you a suggested characteristic. Again, suggested. You could take that on if you wanted to. You don't have to. But all of the backgrounds will then have something that looks like this. A table for personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. Again, it gives me the option to roll a dice so that this can be random. So for a personality trait, I can roll a d8, and I can get any of these 8 outcomes, and that's just what I'll deal with. You can also just choose them. You can also just come up with your own. These are just kind of guidelines to help you out. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to choose ones that I think are pretty cool. So for a personality trait, I'm going to go with that money and manners won't save you from a hungry owlbear. You can have all the money and all the manners, but it doesn't matter. So that's what my character's personality traits are. Ideals, I'm going to go with that the natural world is more important than constructs of civilization. I've grown up in the woods. I care more about nature. My bonds, I'm going to choose this one. I suffer awful visions of a coming disaster and will do anything to prevent it. Maybe it's something that's going to destroy the natural world. It's going to destroy the forest that I'm from. So I'm adventuring to try and stop this thing. And a flaw, let's go with, don't expect me to save those who can't save themselves. It's nature's way that the strong thrive and the weak perish. So I've just chosen some from the book. I could have chosen them randomly. I could have used them to loosely kind of guide me in my own ideas, and that's fine. You can talk with your DM in order to help you out with that sort of stuff. But now we have basically our character sheet. That's the first page. I've gone out here and you can see that at the top I've put class and level. I'm a druid level 1. My background is an outlander. My name, my actual name, you would write your name there. You wouldn't write Martin. My race is that I'm a wood elf. Alignment, of course, you've got like, you know, lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good, all of that sort of stuff. Some people argue it's not important, you know. Characters are driven and they react based on, you know, however they've been brought up, and they might react differently to different things. But for the sake of this, I've put that my guy is chaotic good. He kind of doesn't do things, you know, maybe not law abiding, but he's generally a good person. My experience points are 0, and to get to level 2 I need to get 300 experience points. There's a table in the player's handbook that shows you you know, the points you need in order to level up, and I've given my character a name. I've just chosen Peleus Gold Petal. It's one of the examples given in the book, but you can come up with whatever you like. For now, we're going to leave the second pages and the third pages blank, or I'm just going to leave that up to you. The second page is basically, you can write down your character's backstory and anything like that. You can give it an age, a height, weight, that sort of thing. You can draw a picture of whatever you think your character looks like. That's up to you. And the third page is, if you've chosen a class that can use magic, this is where you would then go and write the spells that your character would know, but we'll cover that in a different video. Now that you've got all of your stats and all of your things in place, you are pretty much ready to go. So enjoy. Thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful. If I've gone a bit too quickly, or if you're still struggling, you can pause, you can rewatch, you can scrub back, and it's all good. So I hope this has helped you out, and join us again at the Bard Cave. See you later.